Hello, everyone. Welcome. So, today we are doing something a little different. In this episode, I'm going to talk with a fellow podcaster about our experience on this podcasting journey and the things we've experienced along the way. But you know what? Before we get into it, I'd like to get into her backstory. So, let's get right into it. My guest today is Tonia Magras. She's the principal owner of Hall Bay Productions and host of the PowerPLAY Show Podcast. She is very creative. In fact, she's a multi-award winning producer, director, and editor. She also has almost 30 years of production experience, which started at PBS flagship television station, that is WGBH-TV in Boston, one of the best television station in Boston. So let's bring her in. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Defining You podcast.
Hello, my friend. It is so wonderful to be doing this with you. Thank you for that great introduction. When you said 30 years, that always kind of like, I have to look over my shoulder, like, who are you talking about? Because it just seems like I've been doing this my whole life, and I really have, I've been doing this my whole life. So, but it's great to kind of do this co-production with you because
absolutely,
I think that we both have some very interesting stories to tell.
Yeah.
Let's get right into it. And I wanted to, for my audience, just tell a little bit about your journey and what got you to your podcast, Defining You.
Most definitely. Well, I have a background in broadcasting. I came from the island of Dominica, and before I moved to the United States, I worked on the radio as a radio personality. And so I moved to the United States. I decided that I wanted to further my education, which is why I came up here. And then along the way, a lot of things have happened during that time. I went to school, graduated, got into the industry, and found a lot of different things that happened along that way, which we'll get into. And then I got into corporate, and then I'm now into healthcare. But just recently, I started my podcast, and it is something. Podcasting is, as you know, it's a new platform. Yes. And so going from radio and getting into this digital platform where you have this audio interviews that people can take with them wherever they go. And so it's very convenient. You have a mass audience, and it is something that I always wanted to do. I feel like this is what I was meant to do. I may be doing other things, but you know what? This is what brings me joy. I am really enjoying it because although it's a lot of work, it's a lot of work. I am actually really enjoying the ride. So we'll get into more about our journey and our experience. But, I just want to say this is something, if you want to do something, no matter how much fear you have, I think you have to take that journey and step right into it, because if you don't start, you will never begin. So now I've given you and your audience a little bit about myself. Why don't you tell us about you and how you got started?
Sure. So, I am a second generation television producer. My mom was an extraordinary producer in television growing up.
She was. Didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
So I spent my high school afternoons going to the television studios and hanging out with her. And one of the things I loved about watching my mom is that she was in charge. And I loved that she was making the decisions, and she was kind of telling other people what to do and how to do it. And so that was something that was always very exciting to me about her role. And really, when I decided, I originally was going to go into television I was going to go to school rather for education, and quickly decided maybe that's not for me right now. I took a job at WGBH as a receptionist and just was so wonderfully consumed with the creativity and the process of what everyone was doing there at WGBH. It's still very much someplace that I hold very fond memories of, and it really
Mm-hmm.
afforded me to learn all of these skills. So I spent 25 years there. I literally
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like kept going up the ladder, they say, and really trying to find my voice. And I realized producing and directing and editing as long as I did, it really wasn't my voice. And so in 2019, I started thinking about, well, why don't I do a podcast? And so that my voice can kind of get out there and really just kind of create a place where I'm able to bring stories to light on my terms and be able to ask the questions that I would want to ask,
Mm-hmm.
and really allow myself to grow in that respect. And it was very scary. I started off with a co-host who's my stepdad, a retired district court judge, and together, we
That's your
went.
stepdad.
He's my
Okay.
stepdad. Yeah, Sevelin Singleton. Shout out, Sevy. So we started this podcast together. He decided that he wanted to move on to other things, and
Mm-hmm.
at first I was like really kind of nervous about like, okay, I have to find another podcast host. I need to find someone else to do this with me. And God kind of spoke to me a little bit, and it was almost like I needed to do this for myself. I needed to kind of handle this on my own. I was really thinking about my voice and what that meant. And so why did I need another voice to help me do that?
Mm-hmm.
So
Is that the fear that's telling you
it
you
is that
can't do it?
fear. It
Yes.
is. It
But you know
is.
what? That there's a little voice inside of you. And that's the voice that you have to listen to. Because sometimes I feel like what you want to do, it's already inside of you. And you mentioned God, and I think that's exactly the voice that was telling you, you don't need anybody to do this. You can do this because you have what it takes. You're a producer, you're an editor, you're a director, and you know the stuff. You know what you want to talk about. So you just have to take a chance on you. And I think that's what you did. I think you're doing so well.
Oh,
But
thank you.
before we jump right into all of these wonderful things that you've done and that you are doing, I want to go back to something you said earlier. You said you wanted to go into education, and then you ended up working at WGBH as a receptionist. So how do you, first of all, why did you change your mind?
Well, for me, as with many other people, my biggest influences growing up were my teachers, particularly my
Mm-hmm.
English teacher, Beverly Smith. And the way she made English make sense to me, not that, learning how to read or write, but really appreciating literature, really appreciating the knowledge of reading and what that meant, and doing things that were extraordinary in terms of
Mm-hmm.
just challenging our minds. And that always stood out for me. And I did tell her when I graduated from high school, I said, I want to be a teacher. I want to do to other children what you did for me.
Mm-hmm.
However, I did an internship as a teacher's assistant, and I was completely overwhelmed. I was very young looking as an adult. So
Mm-hmm.
there were like a couple times I was confused as one of the students, one of the high school students. And it was quite overwhelming for me. I don't think that I tried to do it too young in my
Mm-hmm.
career, because I was like 22 or so, and I was like, I just don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It was just too much.
But no, go
So
ahead.
yeah, so I said, but I still want to be able to impact people with stories, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I talked with my mom. She said, well, there's a receptionist position. It will get you in the door. So I got in the door, and the rest was history.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really nice story. So I think what you're saying is that you were influenced by your teacher and you wanted to be like her, and you had opportunities to try it out and figured out maybe that's not where you need to be. And then you went into a television station and worked as a receptionist
Yes.
and move up the ranks. Take us through that process and how did that happen for you? Because there might be people who are listening who might say, I want to get into television and I want to get in from the top. But for some people who may not be able to get directly to the jobs that they want to do, how did that work out for you? How did that, tell us how that happened?
Sure. Yeah. So, my mom was also an incredible, and still is an incredible, role model in my life. I speak to her every day. And again, it was like seeing her these positions of,
Mm-hmm.
talking to the crew and talking to the talent and really making things happen. And I knew I didn't know enough about television. So I took the receptionist position, and it was humbling. It's a very humbling experience to just be answering phones and passing on messages. And remember, this was before, internet and, and email. So I'm really dating myself right now. And so it was really just, I observed. I
Mm-hmm.
observed what was happening around me. In my free time, I went and hung out in the studios because my mom was still a producer there. So I went and hung out in the studios. My lunch breaks after I was done, if there were productions going around, I went and I said, can I help? I'll go get coffee. I'll run errands, whatever you want me to do. So I really tried to absorb myself as much as I could in my free time, being in the presence of what was happening at WGBH. And when I started to move up the ranks, there are times, and I talk to young people where you can get very frustrated and impatient with the process,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a process. No matter what your career is, it's a process, and it means that you're going to have to sometime take a lateral move, maybe take a move back to get 2 steps ahead, maybe
Right.
take 3 steps ahead, but then you somehow you get knocked down to, the beginning again. All of this is a very humbling process, and
Mm-hmm.
until you can understand that and really accept the path that is intended for you, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be impatient, you're going to quit um, jobs and opportunities just because things aren't moving fast enough. So, one of the things that I really was able to do was really understand what patience meant, because it took
Mm.
a long time. My last position at WGBH was supervising producer in the newsroom.
From
So,
receptionist to supervisory
supervising
producer. That's
producer.
impressive. So
Yes,
patience
patience.
work, you know,
Yes. And
young
humility.
people, right?
Humility is very
Humility
important.
and patience. Young people wants to get there and they want to get there fast. So patience, if you have patience and you do what is necessary, you will move up the ranks if this is something you really want to do. So tell us about the supervisory producing role that you have had and some of the work that you did at WGBH.
Yeah, so I spent almost 20 years directing the show Greater Boston with Emily Rooney, along with some other local productions that were happening at the time. And I think that that's when you and I met many, many
Yes.
years ago.
Yeah.
And the supervising producer that we had was leaving, and I always felt like I did have a leadership role in the newsroom. I was there probably the longest than anyone else was there. I had
Mm-hmm.
grown up at WGBH. So I think when the opportunity came, I was very excited, but I also realized that there was still so much for me to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have all the answers. I did have to ask questions. I did have to fail a few times before I was really able to kind of understand and grasp what it is I needed to do there. But I also realized that it was an opportunity for me to think about what I wanted to do next. So I spent about 5 years as the supervising producer before I left WGBH. And in that time, the newsroom began to change, our technology began to change, the people
Mm-hmm.
began to change. And it was really clear that there was shifts that were happening that maybe Tonia wasn't a part of those shifts. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just think
Hmm.
that, things happen, things shift. You have new management, you have new people coming in who have a different direction than what you were used to. So for me, I started to think about what my next step is. And I always wanted to produce films. And I prayed about it and I talked to my husband about it. And in 2015, towards the end of 20, and I think I left in May 2015. So in November 2015, my pastor, who is the senior pastor of the Abundant Life Church, wanted to do a documentary on the 100 years of the church. And he came
Hmm.
to me, and at the time he had like this, oh, maybe we'll just do this, quick half-hour thing. And I had a bigger vision, right?
Of course, you're a producer.
I
If
had a
you're gonna
bigger
do the
vision.
work, you're gonna do the work right, right?
And so my vision was we're going to do 100 years, 100 voices of faith. And so that meant we would
Wow.
actually record 100 interviews. And that's
Hmm.
how that film kind of came to be. So it was a very long couple of years. It was it was a lot of work, but I loved every second of it. I really
Hmm.
did. And I was able to co-produce with the person who gave me my first job in television, Calvin Lindsay, who was the supervising producer for Say Brother. He had already left GBH far long before
Hmm.
I did, and we were able to kind of come together and do this film. And he's actually co-producing my current film with me as well. So
Which we'll get to, yeah.
which we'll
Hmm.
get to, yeah. So
Hmm.
that's kind of really how I decided to make that transition out of GBH. I really wanted to do a film and see if I had the, again, patience,
Hmm.
humility, to do something like that. And I did.
So, what would you say was that? I know you talk about there was a shift in the industry, and then you're making decisions, right? You're making big decisions to move on and to do other things. What is it, would you say, that was inside of you that told you this was the right time to make that move?
I think it was a couple of things. I think that there was the management at WGBH, particularly in the newsroom, was changing. And I saw that what used to be my role was starting to shift, and
Mhm.
not from my own doing. It's just, and that's what happens. That's what happens in the industry.
The industry
It's
changed, yeah.
it's not
Hmm.
personal. Although there were a lot of things that I took personally. It was a bit of a painful time for me, but I knew that if I had to be obedient with what the steps that God ordered for me, then I needed to accept it and then move on.
Hmm.
And so, we had a lot of younger producers and reporters. People were now doing, their
Yes.
reports on their iPhone. So not as many editors were needed. The change in how the show was being directed and edited started to shift. So my
Hmm.
role just kind of started to diminish a little bit. And had I not really kind of, and I didn't at first. I'm going to admit that I didn't at first. It was very hard. It was very, very emotional for me. I didn't understand it. But I
Hmm.
think now when I see these things happening in my life, I understand what the greater purpose is.
Right.
Um, because I left GBH and I felt like, okay, I still need to make money. So I took another job in public service, working for a city administration, and then took another job in city administration for another town, um, and
And
all
still
along.
producing?
No,
W-
no, this was absolutely administration stuff. This had nothing to
Okay.
do with my creative process.
Hmm.
And God was talking to me. And so he fired me. God fired me. I had never been fired before, right? And it was because I think that I knew that that's not where I wanted to be, right? I made this whole declaration, I want to make a film, but when the film was over, it's like I felt like I needed to do something more.
Mm-hmm.
And but I didn't know what that was. And I had this idea that, okay, I have to make money. I can't just sit home and create and try and build something, which is what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had to, again, kind of get, slapped back several more steps so that I could understand what my greater purpose was.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the title of your podcast, Defining You, because that was a very defining moment for me. Um, I I went to work, I was fired, and I thought that, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, I'm this, I'm that. And that
Mm.
wasn't it.
Right.
God was helping me to define who I needed to be in this process. And I have a wonderful husband who was like, I want you to create. He built me this whole area. I wish I could show you my whole little studio in my home, but he built this for me because he
Mm-hmm.
believed in what it is I could do. And
Mm-hmm. But you know something, you keep talking about God and you keep talking about your faith, and I love that because you had something to hold on to. Things were happening around you, but then that breakthrough came in, and your husband is also. Sometimes we have to look at the people right around us because those are the people that God put right there to help us to get to where He wants us to. So I'm glad that you are mentioning, although you got fired, you looked at it and you said, you know what? I probably am not focusing where I should be focusing. And then you got into where you are today. So, how did you get into, when did you decide that you were going to build your own production company? How did that come about?
that kind of came about in the first, as we started to work on the first film, 100 Years, 100 Voices of Faith.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I told my husband, I was like, I felt something speaking to me. I felt like that there was a bigger purpose that I had for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 so Hull Bay Productions came. Now Hull Bay is the place where my husband lived in St. Thomas where I met him. So that
Mm-hmm.
is the title of the name of our production
Oh,
company.
okay. So
Yes.
there's a connection there.
So, and I was doing some very small projects, some editing projects here and there, a couple of smaller producing projects. But I I thought about, and then I thought of the podcast in 2019, which I talked about, and I knew I wanted to do that. And I'm in my third season now, and that's great.
Nice.
But over a year ago, I thought to myself, I'm ready to do another film. And I told my husband, I said, I'm ready to do another film. And I knew um, it was the right time for me. And things were starting to kind of settle down with me enough that I had the space and the opportunity to do it. And I prayed about it. I prayed
Mm-hmm.
about it because, I do think that that if you have a strong faith life
Foundation.
and
Yeah.
foundation, that you're going to hear what God wants you to do. You're going to hear that. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that this, some people are like, oh, I don't believe in God. I don't do that. And that's fine. If your life is working for you in that way, far be it for me to try and convince you otherwise. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, and I think you kind of share this spiritual faith, that I knew that what was in store for Tonia was far bigger than anything that I could envision. That
Mm-hmm.
God has already ordered his steps for me. So when I prayed about it, it it organically happened. And when I can tell you is that I know now where to put my my dreams, my
Mm-hmm.
prayers, my thoughts, and I wait for God to answer. And
Mm-hmm.
and God is very literal with me. There's not a lot of stuff I have. Oh, what did he mean by that? Oh, I think he meant that. No, he's
Mm-hmm.
very, very literal with me.
Right.
So so that's, yeah.
So
That's
when would you say, can we talk about the time, because again, this is also a learning experience for folks that are listening. Let's talk about your first time you actually produced something. What was that like for you?
Oh wow.
I'm
So
taking you back.
you are taking me back. So this is a great story. So in 1993 or four, in that season of Say Brother, I was an associate producer for Say Brother. And I had a story that, and I can't remember what the original story is. And this is why God is just so good. I can't remember what the original story was, but, and I had been doing like a couple of segments here and there, but I wanted to do a whole show, a documentary, a 30-minute documentary. So I remember my senior producer, Calvin, was in New York, and I think they were interviewing Brian Gumbel. It was like some big thing that they were doing. So
Right.
my interview fell through. The person changed their mind or something, and again, I can't even remember what it was. So
And that happens, yeah.
And that happens, but I didn't have the experience to know what to do with it. But somehow, what was put into my path was this woman, Mika. And Mika was a woman who was part of the Framingham Eight. Now, the Framingham Eight were 8 women who were given jail sentences, prison sentences, because they killed their abusers. So these are men that were either sexually or physically and emotionally abusing these women, and they decided to fight back. And it was a big story at the time. So I got one of the women, Mika Scott Pearson, to talk to me. And I remember calling my Calvin, my producer, and just saying that, you know, I have this woman, she's willing to do this for me. And we went back and forth. And, you know, I think that there was some trepidation on his part because I wasn't experienced, he wasn't here. But I went out and I did the interview, and it was so powerful. Her story was just, it was absolutely powerful, and what she went through, even having to go to jail and then was ultimately released, which I think created the law about being able to defend yourself against your domestic violence abuser. And it was an extraordinary piece of work. It's still one of the things I'm most proud of today. And I got an Emmy nomination, and I was like,
wow, tell us about that.
Wow. I think I cried a little bit. I didn't know what else to expect from it. And I just was like, I was just overwhelmed. And so come Emmy Awards, I took my grandmother with me.
Nice.
As my date. Because she was just, you know, she passed several years ago, but she's still very much an important part of my life. And they called my name. I won. And I don't know from my seat to the stage how I got there. I think I ran like a crazy person because I didn't want them to say, "Oh wait, no, we got the wrong name here. It's not Tonia."
No, it's actually you won.
I did. And
is that the Emmy behind you?
That's one of the Emmys behind me. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Wow.
And it was
wonderful.
It was such an amazing experience. And I took a story from beginning to end, soup to nuts. I found the person, I did the interview, I created all of the elements that went with it. And that was my first time really producing something. And I had the guidance. I did, you know, I had the guidance of the people around me, but that was the first time I really kind of put something like that together. And that felt amazing. It really did feel amazing.
Nice. And your first, and that was what gave you the Emmy.
Yes.
Impressive.
Yes.
That's really impressive. When you know what you know, you have to go for it. And I think that's exactly what you did. And I'm sure with all the trepidations, you still did it. And that's the great thing about having fear and still going through that fear, but still doing what you really want to do. Congratulations on that Emmy win. Very, very impressive.
Thank you.
What is your take on this new era where people just pick up a phone and start recording? what are some of the best practices that professionals like that you can share with people who just pick up their phone that they may be missing?
Well, we're in this state of kind of citizen journalism, that anybody who has a phone basically has a camera and a recording device, and they can,
Mm-hmm.
take pictures and just put anything up on, any social media platform. And I think that there is some very great good to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If had not been for cell phones, things that we should know about, we wouldn't have been able to see. I think
Mm.
of George Floyd as the latest of these examples. Without that cell phone
Yes.
footage, we would have never seen him with an officer's knee on his neck and dying before that crowd of people. So
Mm-hmm.
there is some good to that. There is some good to that. Where I think we fail is when we take our cell phones and we record something, we create our own idea of what this story is, we put it out there without any appreciation for facts and understanding and sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff that I see being put out there, I think is very dangerous and very irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
People still do have the right to privacy. People still have the right to be who they are, even if they're in a public space.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to do that, I think it's incumbent upon you to just try and get a little bit more information, and not just make these assumptions about an individual. You know, it really is kind of like it's a good thing
Mm-hmm.
because we get to see justice in action, we get to see injustice in action, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then we also have um, things that just really don't make a lot of sense and are very hurtful to people that are put out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if your true intent is to be a journalist, it means a lot more than just having a camera with, um, a phone with a camera and an audio recording device. I think it's about really understanding what storytelling is and what fact finding is, and being able to stand up for your story and being able to say that I stand by what
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting out there. I've done my due diligence. I understand what the consequences are, and I'm still going to make this step. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people are going to do that, nor do I think a lot of people are interested in being journalists. They're just interested in just getting the information out there, right?
Right. Who's
Uh,
gonna get it out there
Who's
first?
going
And
to get it out first? Yeah.
you made a very good point earlier when you talked about people having privacy even if they're in a public space. And I really get that because I know when you're producing television shows or even on the news and something very graphic is going to be shown, one of the things that the reporter or the person who's sharing that story would say, some of the information is very graphic. And if you have any kids or you may not, you give the warning before, but then now you have people just post anything. It's like we've
Right.
become so desensitized to some of the things that we see. You see a dead body before you would see that on television and it would
Yeah.
be covered. And so I clearly understand what you're saying, but the industry has really shifted and there's been a lot of change. We have social media influencers, you have YouTubers, you have people who have gotten so famous on some of the social media platform like TikTok and
Mhm.
YouTube and Instagram. And so it's going to be hard to strike a balance, but I
Yeah.
clearly understand if someone is wanting to get into this industry and they're listening to you, someone with 30 years experience in this industry, producing, editing, and directing. And people have passions, and sometimes they don't take the first step because they don't know how to go about doing that. And someone who has the passion for sharing stories just like you, where should they start?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's about really understanding what your voice is And your voice can be that of a director, it can be that of an editor, it can be that of a producer, it can be that of a podcast host. Um, and really kind of deciding how you want to use that voice to affect change. For me, I think that people go into this business for a lot of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most common is fame. And if that's what your goal is, I I wish you the best of luck because it's going to be very hard to do that. Um, being a journalist, being someone, a content creator like we are, I think it's more important that we do the good stories, that we use our platform to uplift and not to tear down. I think it's important that when we use our platform that we're doing it for the greater good of either our communities or um, whatever our passions are. I think that there are spaces for that negativity where people just want to tear each other down, and
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. Um, but at the end of the day, you have to go home and look at yourself in the mirror, and you have to determine whether or not what you did, what you tried to create, was it for good or was it for evil? And I truly believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that, doing stuff like we're doing takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of
Oh,
work, as we
yes, it
talked about.
does.
It's
It
not
does.
easy. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a, get famous overnight type of thing. And so you have to determine, like, okay, so why am I really doing this? And I think you and I are in the same space where we're doing it because we love what we do
It's
and
the
we
love.
love
It's
and
and the joy that you get out of doing something that people can resonate with people. People connect, you get the feedback, and you say, you know what? If I can get one person to be inspired and motivated by this and to get them to get out of their way and do what they love, then I think I'm doing the right thing. And I
yes,
think I'm in the right direction. So I clearly agree with you. And in this world, we have people from all walks of lives, and people have their motivations of why they want to do things. Being famous is good, but it has things that come with being famous. And if you're not ready to be famous, you can be destroyed very quickly. So
hmm
for those who are thinking of wanting to get into an industry such like this industry, and your goal is to get famous, you probably want to rethink the approach and really think about, am I really getting into this industry for the right reasons? Because
yes,
this is not easy.
no,
This is hard work. There's a lot of pre-production that goes into, there's a lot of writing that goes into, there's an angle that you're trying to get, and there are people that you are trying to target. And so going into the industry and not understanding what it takes to do this kind of work, and sometimes people get into this industry and they do not last
right,
because they never took into consideration what it means to do what they are doing,
yes,
and why they are doing it. So first of all, you have to know, why am I getting involved in this? And what is in it for me? And how can I affect the lives of the people that I am reaching? And you have to think about things before you get them done. So I'm really enjoying what you're doing. And I want to really say to you, don't stop what you're doing. I know it's hard work. Sometimes you are working on your own, and there are so many different moving pieces, and you have to get the work. And in the midst of all of that, things happen.
hmm
So what is one thing you wished you had known uh, before you began your career in the TV production television industry?
wow. One thing I wish I had known. I think I wish I had learned to trust myself and trust my instincts.
Mm,
Um, because, and I love what you just said about the preparation and everything. And trust is a big part of this industry as well. People have to trust that when they come to you, that you are going to allow them the opportunity to tell their stories. They're going to they're trusting their stories and their lives in your
Right.
hand. And I wish I had those instincts, those trust instincts early on. I think I second guessed myself a lot. I think that there were a lot of things that I didn't know or believe in myself that other people believed in, and I think that that kind of put me back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's what it is. And I'm going to ask you as well, you know, what is it that you wish you knew many years ago before you started in this business? That
Right. Like, like I said, before I moved to the United States, I had broadcasting experience. I worked on a radio station where I did really well. I didn't have any broadcasting background when I started, but I eventually got a hang of it and I pushed the needle. I did things that was not normally done on radio before. Radio is a theater of the mind. So you have to really think of ways to become creative and make it interesting. And I know I had that. So when I came up here, this was like a completely, totally different thing for me because I'm coming into a new space. This is the United States of America. It's not one little small country.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of adjustments that I had to make. And coming here and you speak English, but you speak English with what we term as an accent, because
Yes.
somebody can tell me I have an accent and I can tell that person you also have an accent because we don't speak the same thing. But the disadvantage for me is that when I graduated, I had many opportunities to work in the industry. I had interviews and things like that. And one of the stumbling blocks for me, I got an interview at one of the radio stations that I really wanted to work on. And I mean I got it. I got the interview and I spoke to the the young woman who interviewed me at the radio station and said how much she liked me. But I couldn't get the job. You know why I couldn't get the job? Because I had an accent. So back
Mm,
then, accents were frowned on. And I came from the Caribbean very confident and was sure of who I was. And now I'm in this space where someone is telling me that
mm,
I have all the skills needed to do the job, but because I speak differently, that they didn't think I was going to work out for the radio station. And I can tell you that crushed me,
yeah.
derailed my self confidence. I was questioning myself, questioning the way that I speak. Even if I speak, I think I speak English very well. If
You
you can
do.
understand me, yes, I have an accent. So what? And so one of the things that affected me is like I didn't feel like there was a chance for me to make it in this industry. I had a lot of drive, but when you go to a radio station and you hear somebody telling you, I think you're great, the only thing is I we probably can't use you because you do not speak like us. And so that really changed things up for me. And authenticity, I didn't understand back then, but I do now. And I had a lot of fear and said, you know what? I'm not going to be accepted in this industry. So I better position myself and go back to school and secure myself. So in case this doesn't work out, then I have something that I could fall back on. So the fact that I was forced to go in a different direction because the opportunities that I thought were readily available were just, they just disappeared and were taken away from me. So I didn't have that confidence that I had
Mm,
before. I didn't do things that I thought. I got shy. I think I closed up and got shy and didn't think I was good at this. And but I went on and I worked in different fields. I work in the corporate world doing many different things, and I was good at that. But that was not what I was called to do.
yeah.
And so there were many times when I made attempts to get back, and I had people who also knew what I did, and I was always vocal, and I was always had a point to make about something, and I would always had a voice. And I had friends who would say, why don't you get back into doing what you were doing before? My mom also said, wouldn't you want to be on TV, being a reporter, telling stories? And I'm like, no, and I look at my mom, like, I said, would you like to see me on television? Telling me these things. And I'm like, but I didn't think I was good enough because of what I was told. And so I had a lot of years to think, but you know what? That thing that I did before was always, and I mean, I did radio, I did some television, but it wasn't at the level that I wanted to do, because I wanted to be involved. I wanted to produce, I wanted to create, I wanted to write. And so, and as a Black person also having an accent, the opportunities do not always readily come to you, because people judge by the time you open your mouth. Even if you speak very well, you get judged for being a Black woman. The standard that they set for you is twice as harder for people like me. And so I didn't feel like I had it, but I know something was inside of me that was not being fulfilled. And although I was doing all these great things in these other areas, in this other industry, that one thing that was inside of me always spoke loudly to me, always. And anytime I have a microphone, you can just, the joy that comes out of that. I am doing, and then 2 years ago I tried, and I had such trepidations. I would not be able to move to do the things. Although I know what to do, I was not able to move and to move myself to do the things that I wanted to do, because I was so scared. I'm like, people may not like this. I have an accent, and that those things and those words that were spoken before kept coming back to my mind. And you know what I said? I saw my friend, my first college friend. I saw Romina, who I also did an interview with. And I saw some of her stuff on my timeline on Facebook, and the branding just spoke to me. And so, I called and we spoke. And then I said, I wanted her to connect me with the person she was working with, because I said, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to push I need to get back. I need to really seriously look at what I want to do and how I can get back into it. And so I worked with a coach. I'm still working with her to get this podcast going, because I have things about wanting things to be perfect before I move forward. I have this thing where I want everything to be right before, and I have the fear of it's not good enough, because we are the worst critics of our own selves. And so by working with a coach, I was able to overcome some of those things. Not completely. I still have fear, and sometimes I still have that shyness in me, but I know I have the fire in me, and I can feel the joy. I started working with someone about 6 months ago, and then I launched my Defining You with Helena J. In February. And I've had a number of really good interviews, and the feedback has been really great. And I can tell you, since I started doing this podcast, there is this joy, unexplainable joy that I feel, because I know, and just like you were talking about your faith, we have that in common. And last week I was praying, because when I started the podcast, I had a lot of episodes in the bank. And then for some reason or the other, I just got stuck and could not bring myself to do more episodes. I'm like, what is going on? I know what to do. I've done this before. What is going on with me? And so there was this thing about, because the response was so overwhelming, people were responding, and the podcast, the downloads were really huge. And in a short space of time, you have 500 podcast downloads for somebody that just started. And I got scared, I'm like, can I replicate that? Can I continue to do that? And so, but I am, somebody said to me, I had actually had an interview with Randy Thomas, who is a 10-time live announcer for the Academy Awards. She does all the voiceover for ABC, ABC News, Nightline, the Emmys, the Tonias, the Kennedy Honors. And I just, what I did about 2 years ago, I posted something online with my old radio picture from back home as a broadcaster in the studio. And I wrote, one thing my dream one day is to become like Randy Thomas. And we are friends on Facebook, not really friends, but we were friends on Facebook. And I tagged her in the post, and you would not believe she inboxed me. You don't know what
That's
that means.
awesome.
This is someone that I followed all throughout my college years.
Mm,
And I mimicked her. I copied everything she did. And I still have tips of those things. And for that person to reach out to me, that was huge. I was elated. I was so excited. I called my nieces. I was telling them all about it. I was so excited. And then she reached out to me and said, I can help you. And then we set up a Zoom. And after that, she invited me because she's also a voiceover coach, which is something that I also am into as well. And she invited me to one of her sessions with some of the people who are also professionals in the field. And I could not believe it. And since that time, she's been so supportive, so encouraging, and tells me that I have a beautiful accent. Even when I did a read, which I wasn't supposed to do, she was saying to the coach, don't you just love her accent? And I'm like, if I had heard this years ago,
yeah.
probably that would have helped me to build back the kind of confidence that I needed for me to follow my passion and follow my path. But you know what? I am back here and I'm doing this, and I know this is what I am meant to do. And so I'm hoping that somebody who's listening, who wants to do something that they love, but they're afraid that people may not like them, people may not like it, people may be criticize them. But if you have a passion and you have the skill, I would just say, take a chance on you. You have to start so you can see where you can go. And you never know by just starting yourself what you might do for someone else. So that's me.
I
And
think that's a
I want to be
perfect way. I think it's a perfect way to end this conversation, because I think that you're right. And, if you love what you do, no matter what it is, it's going to take hard work. It's going to take hard work. And if it means something to you and you have the passion for it, you have to keep going. I think that was a beautiful way to just say that. And I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, most definitely. So tell me, let's talk a little bit about your podcast, the PowerPLAY Show.
Hmm.
What is the goal of your podcast?
So I like to interview people who have compelling stories that talk about how they've used power, whether they're in positions of power or where they're seeking power, just to kind of talk about their journey. This last series that I did for the month of March, Empowering Women, featured the 5 women from my upcoming documentary film, More Than Our Skin. And it really just gave you just a little snippet of their story, but really how they've used living with vitiligo as a way to empower other people living with vitiligo. So I love interviewing people. I love learning more about people and their journey, just kind of the same way that you do with defining you. Because I think it's important that we do hear these stories. And I think, we're giving opportunities for people to listen to others who may have that same path. Or for a listener to say, oh, I've been stuck at this particular place. But then by listening to other people's stories, they know how to kind of get unstuck and get to where their goals are and what they really want to do in life. So that's really what I try and do on the PowerPLAY Show.
Great. So let's talk a little more about your film, More Than Our Skin. And you talk about vitiligo. Some people may not know exactly what that is. So can you give us a little insight about that, the film and the people that are in the film?
Sure. Yes. So More Than Our Skin is the story of 5 women living with the autoimmune disease vitiligo. Vitiligo is, as I said, an autoimmune disease that attacks the pigmentation in people's skins, technically the melanocytes that give us our color. And what that means is it will create spots that are depigmented spots on their body. Sometimes it covers their entire body. Sometimes people have it in certain areas. There's really no kind of rhyme or reason how it presents itself. And you can one of the women in the film was diagnosed at 3 months. Another person was diagnosed maybe 10 years ago. So
Mm.
it can present itself at any time. Doctors really don't
Wow.
understand how it presents itself. There's no cure for it. And there's very little advocacy and awareness of vitiligo. Oftentimes, we will see somebody who looks with vitiligo with the spots all over them, and we think, oh, I don't want to touch that person. I don't, it's not contagious. There's no case where somebody has touched someone's hand with vitiligo and then they themselves
Magically
then
got it,
develop.
yeah.
So this film really is about telling these women's stories, but also creating awareness, creating advocacy, giving information so that people can walk away understanding what it means to live with this disease, and really to check our humanity as it comes to treating one another. It's, I knew very little about it when I started this film over a year ago. And now I feel like I'm an honorary member of the vitiligo community.
And an advocate.
And an advocate, and I truly believe in that. So this film is very important to me, and I just will tell your audience, you can go to morethanourskin.org and learn more information about it, about these 5 incredible women, a little bit more of their stories. And we have trailers, of course, a film trailer, and also other individual trailers of the women that you can take a look at. We are hoping to complete this in the next few months, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Wonderful. So what got you into doing this film? Why was this so important for you to do?
Well, like I said, I had really prayed about doing another film, and I met Valerie, one of the women from my church, many years ago. I actually, when I was producing my first film, I met her, and I was always very, very intrigued with her, with just her personality. I thought she was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. I had never seen something like this. I think that, we can all remember Michael Jackson and how his pigmentation changed. And we all had very different kind of ideas of what that was about, right? We talked about him bleaching his skin. He wanted to be white, and he suffered from a very a serious case of vitiligo. And, with his resources, he was able to depigment his entire skin, which is also an incredible process in itself. But most people don't have Michael Jackson's money, right? So they have to kind of live with how their skin is presenting itself with vitiligo. So I contacted Valerie, and I said, I'd really like to talk to you about doing a project with you about what it means to live with vitiligo. And that's how it was all born.
Wonderful. That's very interesting. I can't wait to see it. So it's interesting that you brought up Michael Jackson, because like you said, sometimes we have to be, when you're putting out information about people you don't know anything about, you really have to make sure you have your information correct. And I think misinformation that was spread about Michael Jackson and him trying to be white and people not having all the information. And sometimes, sometimes things are personal and private to people, and they don't necessarily want to get into it or want to talk about it. So it's very important for when we do things like a podcast, or you do produce a film, for you to have facts and for you to have the right information to share people's stories and also to educate the public as well. So before we go, I also, you are the principal of Hull Bay Productions, and if someone wanted to reach out to you and work with you on a project or have a film idea that they want to share with you, how can listeners connect with you online?
So it's very easy. You can go to our website, hullbayproductions.com. And there you'll have my contact information, or you can just contact me directly at Tonia, Tonia, at hullbayproductions.com.
What would you say is the most rewarding thing for you owning your own company and becoming your own boss?
Well, what's rewarding is I'm doing the work that I know that God is intending me to do. That's the most rewarding thing. It's a lot of work when you work for yourself, when you are your own kind of gatekeeper. It's a lot of hard work. You have to be responsible with your time, with your resources. with other people's resources. It's a lot of work, but I'm doing exactly what I know God is intending me to do. I know that He's
Mm-hmm.
opening up opportunities for me. I am full of grace and humility when it comes to what He has already done in my life.
Absolutely.
And I have a tremendous husband slash partner who is allowing me to sit here and create all day, which is just absolutely
Wonderful.
fabulous.
That's a plus. I love that. So earlier I mentioned about your Emmys. Can you tell us some of the awards that you've gotten over the years? I know you've gotten Emmy awards. You have the Communicator Awards. You've also gotten the Webby Awards. Can you just briefly talk about those and what the awards were, what you got the awards for?
Sure, yeah. So my first Emmy was for the movie, the documentary that I mentioned to you before, Silent Screams, The Plight of Love, Abuse, and Being Black, which was with Mika Scott Pearson, one of the women from Framingham 8. My second Emmy Award was a documentary I did on the New People, which was about the Haitian migration to the city of Somerville, Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the difficulties that were happening with the changing face of that community. And then my third Emmy is for a children and youth special that I did in our
Mm-hmm.
own words. And that was just talking to youth about just the challenges of what it means to be a young person. And I have 5 communicator awards for the podcast for different
Nice.
episodes that
Oh
I did on the
wow.
podcast, and then the Webby honoree for what was that? Oh, I did a series on suicide awareness. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of hard work, but it's worth it, you know. And getting these kind of acknowledgments really just makes me know that I'm really trying to do the
You're
right
making an
thing.
impact and affecting
Yes.
people in a positive way. Well, Tonia, I know there's a lot more to come from you. And I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity and that we could have this conversation. And I'm looking forward to your film coming out, and all the best to you and Hall Bay Productions along with your husband. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And we're going to do this again because I
Oh,
think we have
definitely.
so
We
many
have
other
more.
things to talk about. But yes,
Right.
so,
We just have to frame it.
yes.
All right, this
Thank
was
you.
really nice. You know, yeah,
Yes.
we have a lot to unpack that we can't unpack all of that in 1 hour. So I want to thank you so much, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you so much. And same to you.